My name is Eleanor Vance, I'm 54 years old, and at my daughter's 4th birthday party, my husband announced he was leaving me for my pregnant, 25-year-old stepsister. Before I tell you how his screams echoed through the courthouse hallway, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Thank you for being here, and I hope you're having a good day. It means a lot to me. Go ahead and comment what city you're watching from. Now, let me take you back to that afternoon. 3 hours ago, my world was perfect. The Denver sun was streaming through the bay windows of our home, catching the glitter on a happy 4th birthday banner. The air smelled of sugar cookies and fresh-cut grass from the backyard where a hired clown was making balloon animals for a dozen squealing toddlers. It was my daughter Lily's special day. Her laughter, a sound like tiny bells, was the soundtrack to my life. I remember watching her, her face sticky with pink frosting, her eyes wide with pure, uncomplicated joy as she watched the clown twist a long green balloon into a dinosaur. That image is burned into my memory. A perfect moment, right before the world came crashing down. My husband, Richard, stood by the patio door, a proud smile on his face. He looked every bit the successful family man in his crisp polo shirt, the loving father watching his only child. He caught my eye and winked. I smiled back, my heart swelling with a familiar, comfortable love. 30 years we'd been together. 30 years of building this life, this home, this family. And standing near him, laughing at something he'd said, was my stepsister, Chloe. 25 years old, with the same bright blonde hair my own mother had. When my father remarried 10 years ago, I had welcomed Chloe into our family with open arms. She was just a teenager then, lost and a little broken after her own mother's passing. I'd helped her with her college applications, paid for her tuition when my father couldn't, and gave her a room in our house during summers. She was family. She was the aunt my Lily adored. Richard picked up a champagne flute and tapped it gently with a fork. The cheerful chatter in the room died down. The parents paused their conversations, turning toward him, expecting a sweet toast for his little girl. Lily stopped chasing a butterfly and looked up at her daddy. "Thank you all for coming," Richard began, his voice smooth and confident. "It means the world to us to celebrate our beautiful Lily today." He paused, and his eyes swept the room. They didn't land on Lily. They didn't land on me. They landed on Chloe. Chloe stepped forward, a strange, triumphant little smile playing on her lips. She placed a hand on her stomach. It was a gesture I'd seen 1,000 times, but in that moment, it felt like a declaration of war. Richard's next words dropped into the silent room like stones into a still pond. "Chloe and I also have something to celebrate. We are starting a new life together. She's pregnant, with my son." Silence. Not just a lack of noise, but a heavy, suffocating silence that sucked all the air out of the room. The clown froze mid-twist. A little boy dropped his juice box, and the dark purple stain spreading across our cream-colored rug was the only thing that seemed to be moving. I felt 50 pairs of eyes turn to me. I could feel their pity, their shock, their morbid curiosity. It felt like a physical weight pressing down on me, trying to crush me. My blood ran cold. It was a punch to the gut so violent it knocked all the air from my lungs. But on the outside, I was perfectly still. I looked past the horrified faces of my friends, past my husband's defiant expression, and I looked at Chloe. She was smirking. A smug, victorious little smirk as she stood beside the man I had spent my life with, carrying his child. Something inside me snapped. Not in a loud, dramatic way, but in a quiet, cold, and final way. The part of me that had always made excuses, that had always smoothed things over, that had always put everyone else's comfort before my own, it simply died. Slowly, deliberately, I set my half-eaten piece of cake down on the table. I smoothed the front of my dress. I could feel my hands, steady as a surgeon's. I walked past the frozen guests, my heels clicking softly on the hardwood floor. I didn't look at Richard. I didn't look at Chloe. I walked straight to my handbag, which was sitting on the entryway table. I opened it, and my fingers closed around a simple, cream-colored envelope. It was crisp and cool to the touch. Inside it was my salvation. Inside it was his ruin. I turned back to face the room. Richard was watching me, his triumphant expression now laced with confusion. Chloe's smirk had faltered. I walked toward them, the envelope held carefully in my hand, and I stopped right in front of the man I had once loved. I looked him dead in the eye. The whole world seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the tears, for the screams. They were about to be very disappointed. I smiled, a thin, sharp smile that didn't reach my eyes, and held out the envelope. To understand the ice in my veins in that moment, you have to understand the 30 years that came before it. 30 years. It's a lifetime. I met Richard in college. He was the dreamer, the one with grand plans and a smile that could charm anyone. I was the practical one, the finance major who balanced his checkbook and made sure our dreams had a foundation to stand on. When his first business venture failed, I was the one working 2 jobs to keep us afloat. When he wanted to quit his stable corporate job to find himself, I was the one who managed our savings so tightly that we never missed a mortgage payment. I put my own ambitions of opening a financial consultancy on the back burner. After Richard gets settled, I'd tell myself. After the kids are grown. But we struggled with infertility for years, and our miracle, Lily, didn't arrive until I was 50. She became my entire world, and my own dreams faded a little further into the background. Then came Chloe. My father, widowed and lonely, married her mother when Chloe was 15. Her mother was a kind woman, but frail, and she passed away just a few years later. I saw a lost, grieving girl, and I opened my home and my heart to her. She spent summers and holidays with us. She was like a little sister to me, and a cool, fun aunt to Lily. When it was time for college, my father's savings were tight. I didn't hesitate. I set up a college fund for her out of my own inheritance. She's family, I told Richard. He'd agreed, smiling that charming smile of his. You have such a good heart, Eleanor. That good heart was the first casualty. The unraveling began 3 months ago. It wasn't a sudden revelation. It was a slow, creeping dread that started with a single line item on our joint credit card statement. A charge for $500 at a high-end jewelry store in Aspen. When I asked Richard about it, he waved it off. Must be a mistake, he said, not even looking up from his phone. I'll call the credit card company. He never did. But I did. The charge was legitimate. That was the first loose thread. I'm a numbers person. For 30 years, I've managed our family's finances with meticulous care. Irregularities don't just stand out to me, they scream. So I started digging. Quietly, late at night after Richard and Lily were asleep, I'd sit at the kitchen table, our entire financial life spread out before me on my laptop. I found small transfers, a few $100s here and there, from our joint savings to a bank account I didn't recognize. The transfers were labeled business expenses or loan repayment. They were designed to look boring, insignificant. But they were consistent, happening twice a month for over a year. It was a cold, sick feeling in the pit of my stomach. This wasn't an affair born of a moment of weakness. This was a plan. A long, calculated deception. I hired a private investigator, a discreet professional recommended by a friend. I just needed to know for sure. The report came back a week later in a plain manila envelope. Pictures of Richard and Chloe holding hands outside a fancy restaurant. Pictures of them looking at beachfront property listings in a realtor's office in Florida. Pictures of her wearing a new diamond necklace, the one from the Aspen jewelry store. The worst part came when Richard left his phone unlocked on the nightstand. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely hold it. I knew I shouldn't look. But I had to. Their text messages were a window into their secret world. They talked about our future, our house on the beach. They made fun of me, of my predictable routines, my boring obsession with budgets. And then I saw it. A text from Richard to Chloe, sent just last week. The party will be the perfect time. In front of everyone. She won't dare make a scene with her friends there. It'll be a clean break. Then we can finally be free. Chloe's reply, and she has no idea about the money? Richard's, none. Eleanor trusts me completely. It's always been her weakness. His words didn't just break my heart. They incinerated it. My trust wasn't a weakness. It was a gift. A gift I had given him freely for 30 years. And he had used it as a tool to betray me, to steal from our family, and to plan my public humiliation. In that moment, sitting in the dark with the glow of his phone on my face, the love I had for my husband curdled into something cold, hard, and sharp. He thought my trust was my weakness. He was about to find out his true weakness was underestimating the woman he had betrayed. The day after I read those texts, I didn't cry. I didn't throw things. I went down to the basement, to the old filing cabinet where we kept documents from a lifetime ago. I was looking for one thing. A document we'd signed a week before our wedding, 30 years ago. Back then, my family had money, and Richard had nothing but ambition. He was the one who insisted on a prenuptial agreement. To protect you, Ellie, he'd said, looking earnest. But we both knew it was to protect his future earnings from my family money in case things went south. I remembered my father's lawyer advising me against it, but I was young and in love. I signed it. My fingers, coated in a thin layer of dust, finally closed around the thick, yellowed paper. I pulled it out and laid it on the concrete floor. I read through the dense legal language, my heart pounding in my chest. And then I found it. Section 12. The Fidelity Clause. Richard's lawyer, a cheap hire from his hometown, had put it in as a standard, boilerplate clause. It stated, in no uncertain terms, that in the event of proven infidelity by either party, the wronged party would be entitled to 70% of all marital assets, including retirement accounts and real estate. The family home would default entirely to the non-offending party. And unlike other clauses, this one explicitly stated it remained in effect for the entire duration of the marriage. He had forgotten. In his arrogance, in his meticulous planning to ruin me, he had forgotten the very trap he had set for himself 30 years ago. The first call I made was to my best friend, Sharon. We'd known each other since kindergarten, and now she was one of the most feared divorce lawyers in Denver. I explained everything through clenched teeth, the money, the texts, Chloe, the prenup. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Then she said, her voice low and dangerous, "Good. It's time to burn it all down." For the next 2 months, we became architects of Richard's undoing. Sharon's legal team moved with terrifying efficiency. We subpoenaed the bank records for the secret account, creating a perfect timeline of his financial deception. We got a sworn affidavit from the private investigator. We documented everything. Every dinner, every piece of jewelry, every dollar he had siphoned from our family's future to build a new one with my stepsister. While Richard was busy planning my downfall, I was preparing for his. He thought he was playing chess, but he didn't realize I had already flipped the board over. He was meticulous about his lies, but I was meticulous about the truth. The plan was simple and brutal. Sharon would file the divorce papers on the morning of Lily's birthday. The filing would include an emergency motion to freeze all our joint assets, citing financial malfeasance. The motion would be granted by a judge before Richard even knew what was happening. The envelope was the final touch. It contained a single document, a copy of the divorce petition, officially stamped by the court. It was a declaration. Not just that our marriage was over, but that I was the one ending it. On my terms. The morning of the party, while Lily was still asleep, I drove down to the courthouse. The air was crisp and cool. I felt a profound sense of calm as I walked up the stone steps. This wasn't an act of revenge. It was an act of survival. An act of justice. For me, and for my daughter. I was taking back my life, my financial security, and my dignity. When I got home, Richard was in the kitchen, laughing as he put candles on Lily's cake. He kissed me on the cheek and said, "It's going to be a perfect day, Ellie." I looked him right in the eye and smiled. "Yes," I said. "It is." He had no idea that the papers that would dismantle his entire world were already filed, already working their way through the system, waiting for him in a simple, cream-colored envelope. He thought he was writing the end of our story. He was wrong. He was just a character in the end of mine. If you're still listening, please help me by liking this video and commenting the number 1 below, so I know you've given me a like, and I understand you're with me on this journey. Your support is a tremendous encouragement for me. Please, comment with the number 1, and listen as I continue my story. After I left the party, I didn't go home. I couldn't. The walls of that house, once a sanctuary, now felt like they were closing in on me, tainted by his betrayal. I drove straight to Sharon's house, my knuckles white on the steering wheel. Lily had cried when I buckled her into her car seat, confused and scared by the sudden departure. I'd whispered that we were going for a special treat at Aunt Sharon's, and she'd finally calmed down, clutching the balloon dinosaur the clown had made for her. Sharon was waiting on her porch. She wrapped me in a fierce hug, then took a sleeping Lily from my arms and carried her inside to the guest room. When she came back, she handed me a glass of wine. "How are you?" she asked, her voice soft. I don't know what I am," I admitted. "But I'm not broken." We sat in silence for what felt like an hour, but was probably only 20 minutes. Then, we heard it. A car squealing to a halt in her driveway, a car door slamming with enough force to rattle the windows. We both knew who it was. The doorbell rang, not once, but in a long, insistent series of jabs. Sharon just raised an eyebrow at me. "Shall we?" I took a deep breath and nodded. She opened the door, and Richard stormed in. His face was flushed a dark, ugly red, his hair a mess from where he'd clearly been running his hands through it. And clutched in his fist was the cream-colored envelope, now crumpled and torn. Chloe was trailing behind him, looking pale and uncertain. "Eleanor! What is the meaning of this?" he shouted, waving the divorce papers in my face. His voice was high-pitched, laced with a panic I had never heard before. "A divorce? You're filing for divorce? And you froze our accounts? Today? Of all days?" I remained seated on the sofa, calmly taking a sip of my wine. I looked up at him, my expression unreadable. "I thought it was fitting," I said, my voice steady. "You wanted to start your new life today. I'm just helping you with the paperwork." "This is insane." "You can't do this," he sputtered. "We built that life together." "And you chose to burn it down," I replied, my voice still quiet. "The only thing left to do is divide the ashes." He let out a short, harsh laugh, a sound full of arrogance. "Don't be ridiculous. Any lawyer will tell you that prenup expired a decade ago. It's worthless." This was the moment. I allowed myself a small, cold smile. "Actually, it isn't. You should have read it more carefully, Richard. Or perhaps you should have hired a better lawyer 30 years ago." Section 12. The Fidelity Clause. It's still very much in effect. Sharon can explain the legal specifics if you're having trouble understanding. I watched the color drain from his face. His eyes darted from me to Sharon, who was now leaning against the doorframe, arms crossed, looking thoroughly unimpressed. The smug certainty in his posture just collapsed. He seemed to shrink right before my eyes as the full weight of his mistake crashed down on him. The house in Denver. The beachfront property in Florida. His portion of our retirement accounts. His entire, carefully planned future with Chloe, all built on my money, was turning to dust. He sank onto the armchair opposite me, the crumpled papers falling from his hand. He looked at me, his eyes wide with disbelief and a dawning horror. "Ellie, you can't," he whispered. "After 30 years, you can't do this to me." "I'm not doing anything to you, Richard," I said, my voice devoid of all emotion. "This is all your own work. You just never bothered to read the fine print." I thought that seeing the look of utter devastation on Richard's face would be the end of it. I thought he would accept his defeat, that he and Chloe would slink away to lick their wounds and deal with the consequences of their actions. I was so wrong. I had completely underestimated how cruel and desperate they could be. The fight wasn't over. It had just entered a much darker, more dangerous phase. The next morning, the smear campaign began. My phone started buzzing with calls from family members, from friends who had been at the party. The story they'd been told was a twisted masterpiece of lies. Richard and Chloe had spent the night calling everyone we knew, painting a picture of me as a jealous, vindictive woman who had lost her mind. They claimed I was unstable, that I'd been secretly planning this for months, driven by a midlife crisis. My own aunt called, her voice dripping with pity, to tell me Richard was worried about my mental state. Our oldest friends, people who had known me for decades, were suddenly distant, their voices full of suspicion when I tried to explain. It was isolating. It was humiliating. But it was nothing compared to what came next. 2 days later, I was in the kitchen with Lily. We were making pancakes, her favorite. She was laughing as she smeared batter on her nose. For a few hours, I almost felt normal again. Then, the doorbell rang. I opened it to find a stern-faced woman in a drab pantsuit. She held up a badge. "My name is Carol Finney," she said, her voice flat and official. "I'm an investigator with Denver Child Protective Services. May I come in?" My blood ran cold. The pancake flipper clattered from my hand onto the floor. CPS? It didn't make any sense. Is there a problem?" I stammered. "We received an anonymous report expressing concern for the welfare of your daughter, Lily Vance," she said, her eyes scanning the hallway behind me. The report alleged neglect and an unstable home environment due to the mother's erratic behavior. Erratic behavior. Unstable. The words echoed the lies Richard and Chloe had been spreading. My knees felt weak. This was them. This had to be them. They weren't just trying to ruin my reputation anymore. They were trying to take my daughter. For the next 2 hours, my life became a nightmare. The investigator, Ms. Finney, walked through my home, her eyes missing nothing. She looked in my refrigerator, in my cupboards. She inspected Lily's bedroom, her toys, her clothes. She asked me questions that made my skin crawl. "Do you ever drink alcohol in front of the child? Have you ever left the child unsupervised? Has the child ever witnessed arguments or emotional outbursts?" Then, she interviewed Lily. Alone. They made me wait in the living room while this stranger spoke to my 4-year-old daughter behind a closed door. It was the longest 30 minutes of my life. I just sat there, my hands clenched into fists, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. Every horror story I had ever heard about false accusations, about children being taken from loving homes, flashed through my mind. This was a level of cruelty I could never have imagined. Richard knew that Lily was my entire world. He knew that threatening my custody was the one thing that could truly break me. When Ms. Finney finally came out, her expression was unreadable. "I'll be filing my report," she said, handing me a card with a case number on it. "We'll be in touch. In the meantime, I'll be required to make unannounced follow-up visits." I closed the door behind her and leaned against it, my body trembling uncontrollably. The financial betrayal was one thing. The lies were another. But this was an act of pure evil. They had crossed a line. They had used my child, my sweet, innocent Lily, as a weapon in their twisted game. The cold resolve I had felt before was now gone, replaced by a white-hot, protective fury. This was no longer about a divorce. This was a war. And I would do anything, absolutely anything, to protect my daughter. The moment the CPS investigator's car pulled away, I called Sharon. I could barely speak through my sobs, the words tumbling out in a panicked, incoherent stream. "They're trying to take Lily," I choked out. "Sharon, they called CPS." Sharon's voice, usually so sharp and professional, was filled with a cold fury I'd never heard before. "Stay right where you are, Eleanor. Don't talk to anyone. I'm on my way." When she arrived 20 minutes later, she found me sitting on the kitchen floor, just staring at the wall. She didn't say anything. She just knelt down and wrapped her arms around me. For the first time since this nightmare began, I let myself fall apart. But only for a moment. Sharon helped me to my feet. "Okay," she said, her lawyer mode switching back on. "We fight. This is not about defense anymore. This is about annihilation. They want to play dirty? We'll show them how it's done." That afternoon, Sharon's office became our war room. The fear that had been paralyzing me began to transform into focused energy. This was no longer just my fight. It was ours. Sharon was relentless. She told me that anonymous CPS reports, especially during a contentious divorce, were a common, despicable tactic. Our first priority was to prove the allegations were baseless. We started making calls. First, to Lily's pediatrician, who wrote a glowing letter about Lily's health and my attentive care during every checkup. Then, to Lily's preschool. Her teacher, a wonderful woman named Mrs. Gable, was horrified. She immediately drafted a 2-page statement detailing my daily involvement, my volunteer work at the school, and what a happy, well-adjusted child Lily was. She even got other parents from the school to write letters of support. Our neighbors on both sides, who had known us for years, wrote affidavits testifying that they had never witnessed anything but a loving, stable home environment. Within 48 hours, we had a mountain of evidence, a chorus of voices all saying the same thing: I was a good mother. But Sharon wasn't satisfied. "Proving you're a good mom is just defense," she said, pacing her office. "I want to prove who made that call. I want to hang this around their necks in court." She filed an emergency motion with the court, requesting a subpoena for the records of the anonymous tip line. Her argument was that the call was not a good faith report but a malicious act of perjury intended to manipulate a custody outcome. The judge, seeing the pile of support letters we had already gathered, granted it. The phone company records came back a week later. The call had been made from a prepaid burner phone, purchased with cash from a 7-Eleven downtown. A dead end. For a moment, I felt my hope falter. But Sharon wasn't done. "They're stupid, Eleanor," she said, her eyes gleaming with intensity. "Criminals are always stupid." She sent her own private investigator, a former cop with a knack for digital forensics, to the 7-Eleven. He pulled the security camera footage from the day and time the phone was purchased. And there it was. Crystal clear on the grainy video. Chloe, in a brightly colored maternity top, standing at the counter. She paid in cash, but just before she did, she'd bought a magazine and a soda. And she'd paid for those with her credit card. The timestamp on the credit card transaction matched the timestamp on the security footage to the second. We had her. We had undeniable, irrefutable proof. Sharon printed a high-resolution still from the video. It showed Chloe, looking directly at the camera, a smug look on her face as she slid the burner phone into her purse. Sharon laid it on her desk in front of me. "This," she said, tapping the photo, "is the nail for their coffin." The day of our final divorce hearing, the air in the courtroom was thick with tension. It was a small, sterile room, all wood paneling and fluorescent lights. I sat beside Sharon, my back straight, my hands clasped tightly in my lap. Across the aisle, Richard sat with his lawyer. He looked haggard, thinner than I'd ever seen him, with dark circles under his eyes. Chloe sat in the gallery behind him, her pregnant belly prominent under her dress. She wouldn't meet my gaze. The judge was an older woman, Judge Marcia Fields, with sharp eyes that seemed to see right through everyone. She wasted no time on pleasantries. She reviewed the financial discovery first. Page after page of bank statements, credit card bills, and property assessments. Mr. Vance, she said, her voice cutting through the silence as she peered over her glasses at Richard. It appears there has been a systematic and deliberate effort to divert marital funds into a private account. Can you explain this? Richard's lawyer, a young man who looked completely out of his depth, stammered something about misunderstood business expenses. Judge Fields was not impressed. She turned her attention to the prenuptial agreement. I have reviewed this document, which was, I might add, instigated by Mr. Vance. It is ironclad. The fidelity clause, Section 12, is unambiguous. She looked directly at Richard. You made a choice, sir. And choices have consequences. She then delivered her ruling on the assets. It was swift and brutal. The family home was awarded to me. My retirement accounts, which I had built before and during the marriage, were mine alone. Of the joint investments and savings, 70% was awarded to me, as stipulated in the prenup. The remaining 30% would be split, but first, Richard would have to reimburse the marital estate for every single dollar he had secretly funneled to his private account, plus legal fees. When all was said and done, he was left with his struggling business and a mountain of debt. I felt a quiet, grim satisfaction. Justice had been served. But Sharon wasn't finished. Your Honor, she said, standing up. We have one more matter to address. The matter of the children. Richard's lawyer immediately started arguing about custody arrangements, but Sharon held up a hand. Before we discuss custody, she said, her voice ringing with authority, the court needs to be aware of a malicious and illegal attempt to interfere with that process. She walked to the clerk and submitted a file. Your Honor, this is evidence pertaining to a false and fraudulent report made to Child Protective Services against my client. She laid it all out. The official report from CPS, cleared and closed, stating the claims were unfounded. The mountain of support letters. And finally, she placed the high-resolution photograph from the 7-Eleven security camera on the projector. Chloe's smug face filled the screen for the entire courtroom to see. And here, Sharon said, her voice like ice, is a copy of the credit card receipt, time-stamped to the exact second Ms. Chloe purchased that burner phone. A collective gasp went through the gallery. Richard stared at the screen, his face ashen. Chloe looked like she was going to be sick. Judge Fields' face hardened into a mask of pure fury. She stared at Chloe for a long, silent moment. Ma'am, the judge said, her voice dangerously low. Did you make this call? Chloe could only nod, tears streaming down her face. Let me be clear, the judge said, her voice now booming in the small room. Using Child Protective Services as a weapon in a divorce proceeding is one of the most despicable, reprehensible acts I have ever witnessed in this courtroom. You have not only wasted the valuable resources of a vital city service, you have terrorized a good mother and weaponized an innocent child. She turned her gaze on Richard. And you, sir. Your complicity in this is noted. This behavior goes beyond simple greed and infidelity. It speaks to a profound lack of character and moral integrity. She awarded me sole legal and physical custody of Lily, with Richard being granted only supervised visitation, pending a full psychological evaluation. She then directed the bailiff to provide a copy of the evidence to the district attorney's office, with her recommendation that they pursue charges against Chloe for filing a false report. As we left the courtroom, Richard cornered me in the hallway. He looked broken. Ellie, please, he whispered. I made a terrible mistake. Isn't there any chance? I looked at the man I had shared my life with. I saw no remorse in his eyes. Only self-pity. No, Richard, I said, my voice gentle but firm. That door is closed. Goodbye. I walked away without looking back, leaving him to face the ruins of the life he had so carelessly destroyed. 6 months have passed since that day in court. The autumn leaves are turning brilliant shades of gold and crimson here in Denver, and for the first time in a very long time, I feel like I can breathe again. Life is different now. It's quieter. It's simpler. And it's entirely my own. The house, once a place of painful memories, has been transformed. I repainted the walls, bought new furniture, and filled the rooms with photos of Lily and me. It's our sanctuary now, a place of peace and laughter. The ghost of Richard's betrayal has been banished. My dream, the one I had put on hold for 30 years, is finally a reality. I opened my own firm, Vance Financial Transitions. I didn't rent a fancy downtown office. I started small, in a cozy, sunlit space just a few blocks from Lily's school. I specialize in helping women navigate the financial turmoil of major life changes, divorce, widowhood, career shifts. My first clients were women I met through parent groups, friends of friends who had heard my story. They came to me scared and overwhelmed, their finances a tangled mess left behind by men who had controlled everything. I don't just help them with budgets and investments. I teach them the language of money. I give them the confidence to take control, to understand their own worth, and to build a secure future for themselves. There's a fulfillment in this work that I never found in my old corporate job. Seeing the spark of hope and empowerment in another woman's eyes is a reward far greater than any salary. My pain has become my purpose. As for Richard, I hear things. Our social circle shattered after the details of the CPS call became public. He lost most of his clients and his business is failing. He and Chloe moved into a small, rented apartment across town. The DA did press charges, Chloe received 2 years of probation and a hefty fine. Their fairy tale ending turned into a cautionary tale. I take no joy in his downfall, but I feel no pity either. He made his choices. My relationship with Lily is the center of my universe. The custody battle was terrifying, but it forged a bond between us that is unbreakable. We spend our weekends hiking in the mountains, baking cookies in our new, bright kitchen, and reading stacks of books from the library. The other night, as I was tucking her into bed, she wrapped her little arms around my neck. "I love our house, Mommy," she whispered. "It's so happy now." Tears pricked my eyes. That was all the validation I needed. This fight, this whole agonizing ordeal, wasn't about revenge. It was about this. It was about creating a safe, happy home for my daughter. It was about showing her what a strong, independent woman looks like. The envelope I handed Richard that day at the party felt like the end of my world. I see now that it wasn't an ending at all. It was a key. It unlocked a door to a life I never knew was possible. A life where I am not just a wife or a mother, but the architect of my own happiness. In securing my financial future, I reclaimed something far more valuable, myself. And that is a victory worth fighting for. Thank you so much for listening to my whole story. It means the world to me to be able to share it. If this story resonated with you, I have a question. What is one piece of advice you would give to someone facing a deep betrayal? Let me know in the comments below. And please, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more stories. You are not alone.